Between former President Trump's dominance in the polls and the election of Mike Johnson to the speakership, we're starting to get a clearer picture of the direction for the GOP in the coming year. My colleague Scott MacFarlane sat down with former Republican Congressman of Illinois, Adam Kinzinger, to discuss just that.
We're joined by Adam Kinzinger, former congressman from Illinois, author of the new book, Renegade, Defending Democracy and Liberty in Our Divided Country. So why'd you write the book?
Well, look, it's funny when people said you're writing a book about yourself feels like inherently arrogant. They're right, it does. But I realized that my story actually tells the broader story, which is like what's happened to the GOP, some of the challenges in there, bigger challenges of the country. And so I just want people to be able to look back and say, like, look, a lot of us didn't see some of this coming. We saw some parts of this, coming, but we're in real trouble and we need some help. And here's how we got there. So I think that's really the big motivation behind writing it, because I just think, particularly the Republican Party is in a very unhealthy place at the moment.
What happens if Donald Trump becomes president again in January 2025?
Well, look, I think it's really dangerous. I think, January 6th was like, if you think of a guardrail interstate, the car hit the guardrail and we survived. The guardrails of democracy held up. The problem is the weaknesses are there now and people know where they are. And so just like the guardrails on an interstate can take a hit, they can't take a second hit. And I think if that car hits that again, if Donald Trump is reelected, he's not going to put people around him that are, willing to tell him no, or willing to say, like, no, sir, my commitment is to the Constitution. He'll be able to find people that'll be willing to say, yeah, I'll do anything you want. I mean, you just have to interview probably 20 candidates for attorney general, sadly, to find one willing to say, yeah, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it, including drop the charges against you. So I think it's a really dangerous moment, and it's one that we can't take too lightly. I mean, it's a real possibility he could win.
You think he pardons all the January 6th defendants? You think he gets rid of his own cases? What else do you think happens in those opening days?
Well, I think he first off just puts complete, utter sycophants to him around the Oval Office and around the White House. And what that means is you get not well-qualified people, of course, and people that just want to respond to his whims. He gets no pushback. I think he does end up kind of mass pardoning the January 6th defendants. He's basically said as much. And if his cases are still pending, he could either pardon himself, maybe if he's already been convicted in theory, or he can just simply direct the Department of Justice to drop the cases against him, and DOJ will do that. I mean, we've taken for granted the impartiality of the Department of Justice, because for the most part we've had people unwilling to fight that, to violate it. That's not Donald Trump, though.
It's a new House Speaker now. Trump seemed to have his fingerprints a little bit on that election, and who couldn't win that election when Tom Emmer pulled out. Tom Emmer, who voted to certify the election in 2020. What do you think about the new Speaker and how he got to that spot?
Well, first off, I want to just point out the split screen between Jenna Ellis, I think almost that same day, reading in front of the nation a confession that she lied about the election being stolen. And she was like the fourth person to take a plea, saying, yes, they misled the American people in this Georgia issue. And converse that with, now if you wanted to run for Speaker of the House, you had to be an election denier. That was like the cost of entry. It goes to show how out of touch, frankly, the Republican Party is right now in D.C., and it goes to show how they just don't care about truth. Mike Johnson, look, he's a blank slate, so people kind of say he presents well. The only interaction I ever really had with him was him asking me to join a lawsuit that he was leading to help throw out the election results in places like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. He claims to be a man of faith, and I guess I don't doubt that, except I'm sure he's smart enough to know the election wasn't stolen, so why continue to lie about it? For what? Look, I wish him luck, because if he succeeds, the country succeeds. But I'm disappointed in what the Republican Party has done. And I was impressed that they had kept Jim Jordan out of there, but they unfortunately didn't have the strength to do it twice.
I want to unpack that answer. I think there's something important in there, in particular. You think Mike Johnson and any number of other Republicans in the House with you knew the election wasn't stolen, just knew it, and we're doing this cravenly.
I mean, it's 100% true. Look, I think there's a few now, particularly in the new class, that, ran as kind of stop the steal folks, maybe that truly believe it. But it's very few, very few. The vast majority of them know the truth, but they choose to lie. And I don't know, I mean, for me, I haven't been able to get into why they can do it, except that there's a belief. And I think Jim Jordan's one of these, and maybe Mr. Johnson is too, I don't know. But that truly believes the left is so evil, their words, that is so evil that any way to beat them, you have to beat them, no matter what it takes, even if it's lying, even if it's stealing. That's a very frightening thing, and democracy does not survive under those conditions. And that's why I think, frankly, in 2024, the only thing on the ballot is not names, it's not issues, it's do you support democracy or don't you support democracy, because I think it's that important of a moment.
Author of the new book, Renegade, Defending Democracy and Liberty in Our Divided Country, Adam Kinzinger, served in the U.S. House from Illinois. Thanks for the time.
You bet.